She is the most powerful woman in Chinese history. She entered the palace at just 14, a concubine, one of many. By 25, she was sent to a Buddhist convent. Shaved head, forgotten, erased. But decades later, she did something no other woman in over 3,000 years of Chinese imperial history ever did. She took the dragon throne and declared herself emperor. This is the story of Wu Zetian. She married two emperors, father and son. She rose in the world built for men, using ambition, intelligence, and ruthless strategy. She outmaneuvered rivals, crushed rebellions, and rewrote the rules of power in a world designed to keep her out. So how did she do it? And why, after reaching the very top, did she choose to give it all up? How did she combine female and emperor in a time when the two couldn't coexist? Did she really rewrite the rules of gender and power? And what does her story reveal about the patriarchy in imperial China? In this two-part series, we'll follow Wu Zetian's rise from obscurity to absolute power, and then her stepping down in her final years. This is more than a biography. This is a story about political struggles, a woman's survival in a world ruled by men, and the price she paid for breaking the patriarchal system. Wu Zetian was born into a noble family, but it wasn't prestigious and powerful. Her father, Wu Shiyue, had started out as a timber merchant. This profession was at the very bottom of the imperial social order. In Tang Dynasty, your status wasn't just about wealth, it's about what you contributed to the empire. Occupations were divided into four main classes. At the top were governmental officials. There were scholar bureaucrats who ran the empire. Below them were peasants and craftsmen who grew the food and made the goods for officers, noblemen, and royal families. And at the very bottom were merchants. Despite often being rich, merchants were seen as non-essential. They didn't produce anything, they just moved things around. In a world that valued grain over gold, they were politically sidelined and socially looked down upon. So, when Wu Shiyue began to accumulate wealth, he looked for a way to rise in social status. As the Sui dynasty was collapsing, he found his chance. He joined the military and aligned himself with a rising rebel general named Li Yuan, who would go on to found the Tang dynasty. Wu Shiyue backed the right man at the right moment. He helped Li Yuan overthrow the Sui dynasty and establish a new empire. In return for his loyalty and support, Li Yuan, now Emperor Gaozong of Tang, rewarded Wu with a series of official posts in the new Tang government. But in the Tang era, political positions weren't everything. It was a status-based society. People cared just as much about where you came from. To further raise Wu's status, Emperor Gaozong arranged a political marriage. Wu would marry Lady Yang. The Yang clan was one of the four main aristocratic houses, known for producing scholars and high-ranking officials for the imperial court. But its influence was in decline, and it was no longer among the most powerful great houses of the Tang dynasty. After marriage, they had three daughters. One of them was Wu Zetian. Lady Yang was a defining figure in Wu Zetian's early life. While most girls at the time weren't expected to read or write, Wu Zetian was taught calligraphy, poetry, literature, even political ideas. Lady Yang ensured her daughter was equipped with knowledge and skills typically reserved for the elite. So, how should we understand Wu Zetian's background? In short, she came from a family just high enough to open the palace doors, but not high enough to protect her once she was inside. Her father had only recently entered the aristocracy. He didn't come from an influential clan and had no strong family network behind him. In a society where status was passed down through men and male relatives offered protection and support, Wu had little to depend on. Her parents were in their 40s when she was born, and by the time she was 12, the only male figure she could rely on, her father, had passed away. And that raises the question, how did a young girl with no powerful family behind her survive in the palace? At 14, Wu Zetian entered the imperial palace as a concubine to Emperor Taizong, the second ruler of the Tang dynasty. Like all Tang emperors, Taizong had one official wife, some ranked concubines, and many unofficial women. The wife and concubines were organized in a strict hierarchical system. At the very top was the Empress. She wasn't just the emperor's wife. She ruled over what was known as the inner court. It was part of the palace reserved for the emperor's women, the empress herself, his concubines, female attendants, and unmarried children, female relatives. No men were allowed inside, except for eunuchs. The empress was chosen from great houses and married through formal ceremony. She couldn't be dismissed at will. Her main role was to produce a male heir, but she had authority over all concubines and their children. Her sons held the strongest claim to the throne, even if they weren't the eldest. Below the empress were concubines. They were ranked in a strict eight-tier system with limits on how many women could hold each title. Only 4 women could hold the highest rank. The next 4 levels were capped at 9 women each. Many came from noble or well-connected family, but their rights were far more limited. Their son could become emperor, but only if there was no son born to the empress. The empress and concubines were sometimes referred to as inner officials. The term stood in contrast to the palace officials in the imperial court who governed the empire's affairs of state. The language itself reflects something important. Just as the empire was run through bureaucracy, so too was the reproduction of royal heirs. Producing male heirs wasn't just a private matter, it was a matter of state. It's essential to maintaining the patriarchal order of the empire. So a woman's state could rise or fall based on whether she had a son, how many sons she had, and how much favor she held with the emperor. In other words, how much she contributed to maintaining the patriarchal order. Wu Zetian didn't come from great houses, so she entered the palace as a fifth-rank concubine near the bottom of the hierarchy. Though there were still 3 ranks below her, she had little chance of standing out. The emperor's attention was usually reserved for the high-ranking women. For most concubines, life in the palace meant waiting for a summons from the emperor, and for many, that moment never came. So did Wu Zetian fare well in Emperor Taizong's inner court? Not very well. He was 40 years old when she entered the palace as his concubine. She remained largely unnoticed and never became one of his favored concubines. Throughout his reign, she failed to bear him a child, something that could have elevated her status. When Taizong died in 649, court tradition had a rule for women like her. Any concubine who had not given birth to a child was to leave the palace and enter a Buddhist convent, where she would pray for her husband's soul. Wu Zetian was no exception. She was sent to the Ganye temple. There she shaved her head and became a nun. For most women, this was the end, a quiet, forgotten life in seclusion. But for Wu Zetian, it was just the beginning. So how did she find her way back into the heart of the imperial power? The opportunity came about a year after Emperor Taizong's death. His son, now Emperor Gaozong, visited Ganye Temple to offer incense in his father's memory. There, Wu Zetian saw her chance. According to some historical accounts, the two wept together for Emperor Taizong. Others suggest that Wu had already caught the young prince's attention before his father died. Whether this meeting was a coincidence or a carefully planned move, one thing is clear: Wu managed to reignite his interest. But was personal affection really enough to bring her back to the palace and eventually to the position of Empress? To understand how Wu returned, we need to look beyond romance at the political tensions building both inside the inner court and at the heart of the imperial court. At the time, Empress Wang had lost Emperor Gaozong's favor, which had shifted to Shufei Xiao, a first-rank concubine. And Xiao had something Empress Wang didn't, a male heir. She'd given birth to a son and 2 daughters. Even worse, Xiao also came from a powerful aristocratic family. If Gaozong continued to favor her, Empress Wang's position was in danger. So what did Empress Wang respond to this growing threat? She took 2 key steps. First, she asked Gaozong to name his eldest son, Li Zhong, as crown prince. Li Zhong's mother Liu was of low birth and posed no real threat. As empress, one could adopt the children of concubines, so this move allowed her to claim the crown prince as her own in the future. This move would strengthen both Li Zhong's legitimacy as crown prince and Wang's standing as empress. And of course, Li Zhong would be loyal to the woman who helped secure his position. Second, she needed to weaken Xiao's hold on Gaozong, so when she heard rumors that Gaozong still had feelings for Wu, she saw an opportunity. Wang made a bold decision. She invited Wu back into the palace. She believed that Wu could distract the emperor's attention from Xiao and block Xiao from having more favor. With Empress Wang's support, Wu Zetian quietly stopped shaving her head and prepared to leave the convent. Soon after, Wang arranged for her return to the palace. Once back, Wu was granted a second-rank concubine, titled Zhao Yi. It was a huge promotion from a fifth rank. She quickly gained the emperor's favor and had 4 sons, and became an even bigger threat than Xiao Shufei. Now, some might ask, was Empress Wang politically naive to bring such a capable woman back into the palace? Not at all. From Wang's perspective, Wu posed no real threat. Wang came from one of the 7 most powerful aristocratic families in the empire. Her uncle was a powerful minister in the imperial court. Wu, on the other hand, had no political allies and no family power behind her. Wang saw no real threat from Wu. Then the question is, why did Emperor Gaozong choose Wu over Wang? Was it simply because of personal affection? Now let's shift our perspective to Emperor Gaozong to look at what he faced in the imperial court. Emperor Gaozong's personal name was Li Zhi, and here's the thing. Li Zhi was never supposed to become emperor. He was the youngest son of Emperor Taizong and Empress Zhangsun. His 2 older brothers were the clear frontrunners for the throne. So how did the crown end up on his head? At first, the heir was exactly who everyone expected, Li Chengqian, Taizong's eldest son with Empress Zhangsun. The firstborn child of the empress, on the Tang tradition, was the most legitimate choice. But Taizong had a favorite, his second son Li Tai. Li Tai was intelligent, politically savvy, and skilled in governance. Over time, Taizong's preference for him became obvious, and that created serious tension. The court split into 2 factions, one loyal to the rightful heir, Li Chengqian, the other backing the more capable but less legitimate Li Tai. Feeling his position slipping, Li Chengqian panicked. Convinced that his father was preparing to replace him, he made a desperate move. He began plotting a coup, but the plan was uncovered before he could act. Taizong responded immediately. Chengqian was stripped of his title and removed from the line of succession. Now, with Li Chengqian out of the way, it seemed certain that Li Tai would become the next crown prince. He was favored, capable, and had a group of political supporters. But then came a twist. Taizong began to suspect that Li Tai had helped engineer Chengqian's downfall, that he had manipulated the situation to eliminate his older brother. That revelation destroyed the emperor's trust. In Taizong's eyes, Li Tai was no longer brilliant. He was dangerous, too ambitious, too calculating. So Taizong removed him too. Now, neither of the 2 elder sons could inherit the throne. With no better option left, Taizong reluctantly named his youngest son by the empress, Li Zhi, as crown prince. But there was a problem. Li Zhi had never been prepared to rule. Unlike his older brothers, Taizong hadn't trained him in the skills or knowledge needed to govern an empire. Most court officials saw him as weak, indecisive, and politically inexperienced. Only his uncle Zhangsun Wuji supported him. In the final years of Taizong's reign, he remained unsure about Li Zhi's ability to control and run the empire, so he handed more and more power to Zhangsun Wuji. Zhangsun had headed the legislative bureau, but Taizong expanded his authority further, giving him control over the executive and the examination bureaus as well. That meant policymaking, oversight, and enforcement were all in Zhangsun Wuji's hands. By the time Li Zhi ascended the throne as Emperor Gaozong, the title was his, but power wasn't. The real ruler was Zhangsun Wuji. To many at the court, Gaozong didn't look like a ruler, he looked like a puppet, and he knew it. Gaozong desperately wanted to take back control. So how did that desire connect to his decision to replace Empress Wang with Wu Zetian? Emperor Gaozong didn't turn to Wu at the beginning. Like many puppet emperors, he turned to the only political force available to him at the time, his in-laws. He began promoting Empress Wang's uncle Liu Shi to a higher position in the imperial court, hoping to build a political alliance of his own. But Gaozong was too weak to offer real protection, and Liu Shi knew it. Instead of fully backing the emperor, Liu had his own idea. His strategy wasn't to support Gaozong, but to control the next emperor. Remember Empress Wang's first move against Shao? The plan to adopt Gaozong's oldest son Li Zhong and push Gaozong to name him crown prince. That's Liu's idea. But naming a crown prince wasn't something Gaozong could do on his own. It requires the approval of Zhangsun Wuji, the man truly pulling the strings. So Liu and Zhangsun form an alliance, working together to make Li Zhong the heir. At the moment, Gaozong saw things clearly. He couldn't reclaim power through Empress Wang or her family, and that's when a new idea began to form. If he couldn't work with Wang, maybe it's time to replace her. And Wu Zetian, she was watching. She understood the court dynamics, and she was about to make her move. What pushed Emperor Gaozong even further towards removing Empress Wang came under tragic and suspicious circumstances. Wu Zetian's newborn daughter suddenly died. The cause of death remained a mystery to this day, while Wu accused Empress Wang of killing the child out of jealousy. By this point, Wu had built a secret intelligence network inside the inner court. She used it to spread the story. Whispers of Empress Wang's cruelty and envy began circulating throughout the palace, and eventually they reached Gaozong. Having frustrated with Wang and her uncle Liu Shi, Gaozong began to believe the rumors. His thoughts turned towards deposing her. But removing an empress was no small matter. In the Tang Dynasty, imperial marriage was a major political decision. It required support from bureaucratic elite. And right now, Zhangsun Wuji was firmly on Empress Wang's side. As Gaozong pushed to elevate Wu Zetian, the court began to split. One faction backed Wu, the other defended Wang. For Gaozong, this wasn't just about choosing a wife, it was about building his own political alliance. By removing Wang and promoting Wu, he could break away from the aristocratic factions that had controlled the court since his father's death, and start building a new power base that answered to him. Soon, a group of lower-ranking officials began publicly supporting Wu Zetian. They saw her as a political disruptor, someone who could shake up the old power structure, and for them that meant opportunity. By backing Wu, they could help weaken the dominance of the great aristocratic families and rise through the ranks themselves. However, deposing Empress was no simple matter. In the beginning, they were in a weak position. Every time Gaozong tried to remove Empress Wang and named Wu as the new empress, the motion was blocked by Zhangsun Wuji and his powerful faction. For a while, it seemed impossible to challenge Zhang Sun's authority, but Wu didn't back down. Through her mother, Lady Yang, she expanded her intelligence network beyond the palace walls. She was gathering information, spreading influence, and gaining the support of officials who wanted change. At this point, Wu Zetian and Emperor Gaozong weren't just lovers. They were becoming a political team with shared interests, shared risks, and shared enemies. Then came a turning point. They found a powerful new ally, General Li Ji. Li Ji had been one of the most powerful military figures during Taizong's reign. Before his death, Taizong had entrusted Li Ji with the responsibility of supporting Gaozong. But in the first year of Gaozong's rule, Li Ji chose to stay out of court politics. He understood just how dominant Zhangsun Wuji had become. But now the times were shifting. Li Ji saw an opportunity, whether driven by political ambition or a genuine desire to support the emperor. He made his move, and threw his support behind Gaozong and Wu Zetian. With military backing from Li Ji, the balance of the power tipped. The moment had arrived. Empress Wang was removed. Wu Zetian rose to the top of the inner court hierarchy. She was now the Empress of the empire. But it wasn't the end. In the next video, we'll follow Wu Zetian's rise from Empress to Emperor. What pushed her go beyond even the highest position a woman was expected to hold and claim the throne for herself? And what did it cost? What was it like to be a female emperor in a patriarchal system? We'll uncover all of this and more in part 2. This story is brought by you by China Stories, a channel dedicated to share China stories with the world and bring scholarly insights to the public. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what's happening next.